The phone call came on a Tuesday afternoon while I was finishing paperwork at my desk. My brother Owen's voice sounded casual, almost friendly, like he was calling to discuss weekend plans or ask about the weather. "Hey, about the reunion this Saturday," he said. "I think it's better if you don't come this year." I stopped writing mid-sentence. The pen hovered above the paper while my brain tried to process what I'd just heard. "What do you mean, don't come?" "Just think it's for the best," Owen continued smoothly. "Family dynamics have been tense lately. Your presence might make things uncomfortable for everyone." My presence. Like I was some unwelcome stranger instead of his sister. Instead of the person who'd driven him to college when his car broke down. Instead of the one who'd helped cover Mom's medical bills when he claimed he couldn't afford them. "Owen, I've been planning this for months. I already..." "Look, Jenny, don't make this difficult. Everyone agrees it's the right call. Just sit this one out, okay?" The line went dead before I could respond. I sat there staring at my phone, feeling something cold settle in my chest. Not anger yet. Just shock mixed with the kind of hurt that comes when someone you trust casually erases your place in the family. I could have fought back immediately. Could have called other family members, demanded explanations, forced the confrontation Owen clearly wanted to avoid. But something stopped me. Maybe it was exhaustion from years of being the reliable one. Maybe it was curiosity about how far he'd actually go. Or maybe some quiet part of me recognized this moment for what it really was. The final piece of a pattern I'd been ignoring for too long. So I texted Owen back with 3 words. "Okay. I understand." His response came within seconds. "Thanks for being reasonable." Reasonable. That's what he called it when I stepped aside without protest. When I made things easy for him by erasing myself from the family gathering I'd been looking forward to for months. I sat at my kitchen table that evening, watching the sun set through the window, and felt something shift inside me. Not rage. Not even sadness anymore. Just clarity. For the first time in years, I wasn't rushing to fix someone else's problem. I wasn't smoothing over conflict or making sacrifices so others could be comfortable. I was simply watching what happened when I stopped. And what happened next would reveal everything Owen assumed he'd successfully hidden. The family group chat exploded the next morning. I watched the messages roll in while drinking coffee at my usual spot by the kitchen counter. Owen had sent the announcement at 8:47. "Just wanted to give everyone a heads up that Jenny won't be joining us this year. She's dealing with some personal stuff and thought it was best to take time for herself. Let's respect her privacy and make sure everyone else has an amazing reunion." I read it 3 times, each word landing like a small, calculated blow. Personal stuff. Privacy. Like I was struggling with some crisis that required space and understanding, rather than being deliberately excluded by my own brother. The responses came fast. Aunt Patricia sent a sad emoji. Cousin Nathan wrote, "Hope you're okay, Jenny." Uncle Warren replied, "We'll miss you." Nobody questioned it. Nobody asked if Owen had actually spoken to me. They just accepted his version of events because Owen had always been good at controlling narratives. He knew how to frame situations, so he looked thoughtful and caring while quietly erasing anyone who might complicate his plans. I typed a response, then deleted it. Then typed another and deleted that too. Finally, I wrote nothing at all. Just watched the messages continue, watched my family accept my absence without question, and felt the last thread of obligation quietly snap. I thought back to 3 years ago, when Dad's trucking business nearly collapsed during the supply chain crisis. Orders dried up, costs skyrocketed, and the company he'd spent 20 years building teetered on the edge of bankruptcy. Owen had just started his new position in management consulting. Busy schedule, he said. Important clients, he explained. Couldn't possibly take time away from his career to help with family business problems. So I did. I took unpaid leave from my accounting job, drove home, and spent 4 months reorganizing Dad's entire operation. I restructured contracts, negotiated with suppliers, implemented new tracking systems, and worked 16-hour days to keep everything functioning. Dad recovered. The business stabilized. Within a year, it was more profitable than ever. Owen showed up for the celebration dinner, smiled for photos, and told everyone how proud he was of our family's resilience. Never mentioned my name. Never acknowledged the months I'd sacrificed while he maintained his comfortable distance. When I'd brought it up privately later, he'd shrugged and said, "You were always better with numbers anyway." It made sense for you to handle it. Like my time and career and sacrifice were just logical resource allocation, not acts of love and loyalty. The pattern continued. Last year, Mom needed surgery. The family discussed who would stay with her during recovery. Coordinate medications, manage appointments, handle daily care for 6 weeks. Owen volunteered immediately, speaking passionately in the family group chat about duty and responsibility and being there when it mattered most. Everyone praised his commitment. Then, 3 days before Mom's surgery, he sent a private message. Something came up at work. Major client presentation. Can you cover for me? Just for the first 2 weeks, then I'll take over. Those 2 weeks became 6. His temporary absence stretched into the entire recovery period. I rearranged my schedule, postponed projects, and spent a month and a half sleeping on Mom's couch while Owen sent occasional text messages asking how things were going. When Mom was finally back on her feet, Owen posted family photos on social media with long captions about sacrifice and family bonds. Comments poured in calling him an amazing son. I wasn't in any of the photos. When I'd asked him about it, he said, "You're camera shy anyway, right? Didn't think you'd want to be tagged in everything." But I wasn't camera shy. I just wasn't part of his carefully constructed public narrative. The financial piece came into focus 6 months ago. Dad had decided to formalize the business transition, dividing ownership among family members who'd contributed significantly over the years. Owen requested a private meeting with Dad, just the two of them. I wasn't invited. Afterward, Dad seemed troubled but wouldn't discuss details. Then the paperwork arrived. Owen had been designated as primary heir, receiving controlling shares in the business. My name appeared in a minor capacity. Acknowledgement for administrative support during 2021 reorganization. Administrative support. 4 months of unpaid labor, hundreds of hours of strategic planning, the complete operational overhaul that saved the company, reduced to administrative support. I'd asked Dad about it directly. He'd looked uncomfortable, said Owen had made compelling arguments about leadership experience and business school credentials. About how the company needed someone with management training to guide its future. Owen had systematically rewritten history, positioning himself as the natural successor while minimizing my actual contributions until they were barely visible in the official records. I didn't fight it then. I told myself family harmony mattered more than recognition. That Dad was getting older and needed to make decisions he felt comfortable with. That my relationship with Owen was more important than business ownership percentages. Now I realized my silence had simply taught him he could take whatever he wanted without consequences. The week before the reunion, Owen posted constantly on social media. Photos of his new luxury SUV with captions about finally having space for the whole family. Updates about the beach house he'd rented for the weekend, describing elaborate meal plans and activity schedules. He tagged everyone. Aunt Patricia, Uncle Warren, cousins, nephews, nieces, even distant relatives who hadn't attended a family event in years. Everyone except me. Comments filled with excitement. People responding with countdown emojis and heart reactions. Owen replied to each one personally, building anticipation like he was planning a wedding or milestone celebration instead of the standard annual gathering we'd held for decades. His confidence was absolute. He decided I wasn't coming, announced it to the family, controlled the narrative, and was now proceeding as if my exclusion had been inevitable and uncontroversial. In his mind, he'd already won. The reunion would happen without me, everyone would have a wonderful time, and his version of family history, the one where he was the responsible leader and I was the peripheral helper, would be cemented permanently. What Owen didn't realize was that confidence built on lies becomes incredibly fragile the moment truth enters the room. Friday afternoon, I received a text from Aunt Helena. She was Dad's older sister, quiet and observant, someone who rarely involved herself in family drama but noticed everything. "Are you really not coming tomorrow?" I stared at the message for a long moment before responding. Owen said it was better if I stayed home. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, "That's interesting. Your father seemed surprised when Owen mentioned it yesterday. Said he didn't know you decided not to attend." My chest tightened. Dad didn't know? Owen told him you'd called earlier in the week. Said you were feeling overwhelmed and needed space. But your father looked confused. Said he'd just spoken to you on Tuesday and you'd seemed excited about the reunion. I sat down slowly, processing this new information. Owen hadn't just excluded me. He'd lied to Dad about my reasons for not attending. Created an entire false narrative that positioned me as emotionally fragile while he played the concerned brother respecting my boundaries. Aunt Helena's next message arrived. I've watched Owen operate for years. Reminds me of your grandfather. My father. Same pattern. Control information, control perception, control outcomes. Works beautifully until someone starts asking questions. Then, I'm asking questions. That evening, I pulled out the file folder I'd assembled 6 months ago. The one I'd created after the business ownership conversation, when I'd started documenting everything instead of simply accepting Owen's version of reality. Inside were bank statements showing the personal funds I'd used to cover business expenses during the crisis. Email chains where Owen had explicitly agreed to temporarily step back from family obligations, promising to reimburse me later for costs I'd covered. Text messages where he'd asked me to handle situations, then claimed credit publicly. But the most important document was one I'd forgotten about until last month. Dad's original succession plan from 5 years ago, written before Owen's persuasive private meeting. In that version, the business was divided equally between Owen and me. Dad had written detailed notes explaining his reasoning. My operational expertise, my demonstrated commitment, my understanding of the company's practical functions. Owen was acknowledged for his business knowledge, but Dad had been clear that leadership required more than credentials. It required presence. I'd found the document in a filing cabinet at Dad's office, misfiled in old tax records. Dad probably didn't remember it existed. Owen certainly didn't know I'd discovered it. I photocopied everything, stored originals in a safety deposit box, and created a digital backup. Not because I'd planned to use it. Just because some instinct told me the truth might matter someday. That day had arrived. Saturday morning, I woke early and dressed carefully. Navy slacks, a simple white blouse, minimal jewelry. Professional but not formal. Calm but not casual. I wasn't going to the reunion. That boundary Owen had drawn was real, and I wouldn't cross it by showing up uninvited. But the reunion wasn't where this needed to happen anyway. Instead, I drove to the law offices where Dad's estate attorney, Mr. Bernard, kept weekend hours for clients who couldn't meet during the week. I'd called ahead, explained the situation briefly, and asked if he'd review some documents. He agreed immediately. Mr. Bernard had worked with our family for 30 years. He'd drafted the original succession plan, and I suspected he'd been troubled when it was suddenly revised after Owen's private meeting with Dad. I spread the documents across his conference table. The original succession plan. The revised version. Bank statements. Email chains. A timeline I'd constructed showing the pattern of Owen's behavior over the past 3 years. Mr. Bernard studied everything in silence for 20 minutes. Then he looked up, expression grave. Your father needs to see this. All of it. I know, I said. But not at the reunion. Not in front of everyone. That would be cruel. Tomorrow then. Let me arrange it. I nodded. Tomorrow would be perfect. After the reunion ended, after Owen's moment of triumph, after he'd celebrated what he believed was his complete control over the family narrative. That's when the truth would surface, quietly and completely, in a setting where facts mattered more than performance. The reunion proceeded without me. I knew because the family group chat continued filling with photos and updates throughout the day. Owen in the center of every group shot, arm around Dad, smiling broadly. Aunt Patricia posting about the amazing meal Owen had prepared. Cousins commenting on the beautiful beach house, the thoughtful planning, the perfect weather. Nobody mentioned my absence. Not after Owen's initial announcement. I'd been successfully edited out, and the family gathering continued smoothly as if I'd never been part of it at all. I spent the day organizing my thoughts, reviewing documents one final time, preparing for tomorrow's conversation. No anger, no vindictiveness, just clarity about what needed to happen next. Around 7 in the evening, the posts shifted slightly. Uncle Warren mentioned how nice it was that everyone was together. Aunt Helena replied, almost everyone. 3 words, but they hung in the digital space like a question mark nobody wanted to address. Then Cousin Jackson commented, wait, why didn't Jenny come again? Owen responded immediately. She needed personal time. Let's respect that and focus on enjoying our time together. But Jackson persisted. Did anyone actually talk to her? Like, did she say she didn't want to come? No response from Owen. The chat went quiet for 15 minutes before Aunt Patricia posted another group photo, clearly trying to redirect the conversation. But the question had been planted. Sunday morning, I received a text from Owen. Hope you're doing okay. Family missed you yesterday. Maybe we can grab coffee next week and catch up. The message was perfectly crafted. Casual concern, implied affection. The suggestion that our relationship was intact and healthy despite his having excluded me from a major family event. I didn't respond. An hour later, another message. Jenny? Everything all right? Still no response from me. Then, at 10:30, my phone rang. Owen's name on the screen. I let it go to voicemail, listened to his message afterward. Hey, it's me. Getting a little worried since you're not responding. Just want to make sure you're okay. Call me back when you get this. The concerned brother routine. The same performance he'd maintained throughout the weekend, the same role he'd perfected over the years. Caring just enough to look good, never enough to actually change his behavior. At 11, I received a call from Mr. Bernard. Your father's here. Are you ready? I'm on my way, I said, and drove toward the law office where the truth had been waiting patiently for its moment. Dad sat in Mr. Bernard's conference room looking confused and slightly defensive. Owen hadn't told him about this meeting. Mr. Bernard had simply called and said there were urgent matters regarding the business succession that required immediate attention. I entered quietly, and Dad's expression shifted to surprise. Jenny? What's this about? I sat down across from him, documents organized in neat folders in front of me. Mr. Bernard positioned himself at the head of the table, neutral and professional. Dad, I need to show you some things. I'm not here to cause problems or create drama. I just need you to see the full picture of what's been happening. He frowned. If this is about the business ownership, Owen explained. Please, I interrupted gently. Just look first. Then we can talk. I slid the first folder toward him. The original succession plan, dated 5 years ago, in Dad's own handwriting with his signature at the bottom. He opened it slowly, scanning the pages. His face changed as he read, confusion giving way to recognition. I forgot about this, he said quietly. This was from before. Before Owen's private meeting with you, I finished. The meeting where he convinced you to change everything. Dad read through the entire original plan while I sat silently. I'd highlighted key sections, his notes about my operational contributions, his reasoning for equal distribution, his concerns about Owen's tendency to prioritize appearance over substance. When he finished, he looked up, something troubled in his eyes. Owen said you didn't want the responsibility. That you told him the business stressed you out and you'd be happier with a smaller role. I shook my head. I never said that to Owen. Did he give you any evidence? Any conversation where I supposedly expressed that? Dad thought for a long moment, then shook his head slowly. No. He just said you discussed it between yourselves. I assumed. You assumed he was telling the truth, I said. You trusted him. He's my son, Dad said, but his voice carried less certainty now. So am I replied. Your daughter. And I've spent 3 years supporting this family while Owen managed the perception of supporting it. There's a difference. I opened the second folder. Bank statements, carefully annotated. Highlighted entries showing money I'd spent keeping the business afloat during the crisis. Loans I'd taken out. Credit cards I'd maxed. All repaid eventually, but never with the contributions acknowledged in any official capacity. Dad studied the numbers, his jaw tightening. I didn't know you'd covered this much personally. Because Owen never mentioned it when he explained how we saved the business. Mr. Bernard cleared his throat. I need to share something as well. 6 months ago, when Owen requested the revised succession documents, he specifically asked me not to mention the meeting to anyone else in the family. He said you and Jenny had already discussed everything privately, and he wanted to handle the legal paperwork efficiently. Dad looked up sharply. He told me the same thing. Said Jenny already knew and approved. I never approved, I said. I didn't even know about the revision until the paperwork arrived weeks later. By then, Owen had already positioned it as a settled decision that would be awkward to challenge. I could see Dad processing this, connecting pieces he'd previously kept separate. The discomfort he'd felt during Owen's meeting. The way Owen had rushed the paperwork. The strange insistence that everything remain private until finalized. "Why didn't you say something?" Dad asked, and there was genuine pain in his voice. "Because I didn't want to divide the family," I said. "Because I thought maybe Owen's version was close enough to truth that the details didn't matter. Because I spent years believing family harmony was more important than being right." I paused, then added quietly. "And because Owen is very good at making people think questioning him means you're being difficult, dramatic, or disloyal." Dad flinched slightly. He knew exactly what I meant. I opened the third folder. Email chains and text messages, arranged chronologically. Every time Owen had asked me to handle something, then claimed credit afterward. Every promise to reimburse me for expenses. Every instance where he'd rewritten events to place himself in the center of family achievements. Dad read through them slowly. His expression shifted from troubled to genuinely shocked. "He told me he'd coordinated Mom's entire recovery," Dad said, pointing to one email chain. "That you'd helped out here and there. But he'd managed the situation." "I was there for 6 weeks straight," I said. "Owen visited twice." "And this," Dad continued, pointing to another exchange. "He said he'd negotiated the new supplier contracts during the crisis." "I negotiated those contracts." Owen reviewed them afterward and suggested one minor change. Dad kept reading. With each document, the careful narrative Owen had constructed began unraveling. Not dramatically. There were no explosive revelations or shocking betrayals. Just the steady, undeniable accumulation of small lies that had added up to a completely false version of reality. Finally, Dad set down the last page and leaned back in his chair. "I've been a fool," he said quietly. "No," I replied. "You trusted your son. That's not foolish. But now you know the truth." Dad sat in silence for several minutes. Mr. Bernard and I waited, letting him process everything at his own pace. Finally he spoke. "The reunion yesterday. Owen told me you decided not to come because you were dealing with personal issues. But that's not what happened, is it? Owen called me Tuesday and told me not to come. Said my presence would make things uncomfortable. When I agreed to stay away, he told the family I'd chosen not to attend because I needed space. Made it seem like I was struggling with something private, and he was respecting my boundaries." Dad closed his eyes. "And I believed him. Everyone believed him." "Aunt Helena questioned it," I said. "She's the one who reached out to me. But mostly yes. Everyone believed Owen's version because he spent years establishing himself as the reliable one while quietly ensuring my contributions stayed invisible." I pulled out one final document, a letter I'd written the night before, addressed to Dad. "I'm not here to destroy Owen or split the family apart. I'm here because you deserve to know the truth before making any more permanent decisions about the business, about inheritance, about who you trust with family leadership." Dad took the letter, unfolded it, and read my carefully chosen words about wanting fairness, not revenge. About hoping we could move forward with honesty instead of continuing with comfortable lies. When he finished, he looked directly at me for the first time since the meeting began. "What do you want, Jenny?" I'd anticipated this question. I'd spent weeks thinking about what I actually wanted, separate from anger or hurt or the desire to prove Owen wrong. "I want the business succession restored to your original plan. Equal distribution. Shared leadership. Not because I need recognition, but because your original instincts were correct. Owen has business knowledge. I have operational expertise. Together we could actually build something. Separately, with Owen controlling everything, the company will look impressive from the outside while slowly deteriorating from within." Dad nodded slowly. "I want honesty about my contributions," I continued. "Not public credit or social media posts. Just accurate family history. I want my role in saving the business acknowledged. I want the months I spent caring for Mom recorded truthfully. I want my nieces and nephews to grow up knowing that contributions matter more than performance." I paused. "And I want Owen to understand that control built on lies isn't real power. It's just theater. And eventually the curtain falls." Mr. Bernard spoke up. "I can draft revised succession documents reflecting your original intentions. Given what we've reviewed today, I believe you have clear legal grounds to make those changes. Dad sat quietly, absorbing everything. Then he asked the question I'd been waiting for. What happens when I tell Owen? Owen will be angry, I said honestly. He'll claim I'm being vindictive. He'll say this is about jealousy or resentment. He'll probably tell you I've manipulated the evidence or misrepresented situations. Dad winced, but didn't argue. He might threaten to distance himself from the family if you don't maintain the current arrangement. He's good at making people fear losing him, which keeps them from questioning his behavior. I met Dad's eyes directly. But you taught me something important about business. Short-term peace built on false foundations always costs more than short-term conflict built on truth. You said that when we were restructuring supplier contracts. You meant it about business. It's just as true about family. Dad absorbed this, then looked at Mr. Bernard. How quickly can you prepare revised documents? I can have them ready by tomorrow afternoon. Do it, Dad said. Then to me. I owe you an apology. A significant one. I let Owen control information, and I didn't verify his version of events. That's on me. I accept your apology, I said. Now we move forward with the truth. The next morning, Dad called a family meeting. Not the casual gathering Owen preferred, but a formal sit-down with everyone present. Aunt Helena, Uncle Warren, and Mr. Bernard all attended as witnesses. Owen arrived looking confident, apparently assuming this was some kind of follow-up to the successful reunion. His smile faded when he saw Mr. Bernard and the organized documents on the table. What's this about? Owen asked. Corrections, Dad said simply, to several misunderstandings that have developed over the past few years. Dad explained everything methodically. The original succession plan. The revision Owen had requested based on false information. The pattern of Owen claiming credit for Jenny's work. The lies about my absence from the reunion. Owen tried interrupting several times, but Dad held up his hand. I'm not finished. When Dad finally concluded, Owen's face had gone through several shades of red. He turned to me, eyes blazing. This is what you wanted? To humiliate me in front of everyone. I kept my voice calm. I wanted honesty. Dad deserved to know the truth before making permanent decisions. Truth. Owen laughed bitterly. You've twisted everything to make yourself look like a victim. You're angry about the business and you're using emotional manipulation too. Aunt Helena cut him off. Owen, I was there. I watched you take credit for your sister's work. Multiple times. Uncle Warren spoke next. The reunion exclusion bothered me. You made it sound like Jenny's choice, but something felt wrong about the whole situation. Owen looked around the room, realizing his usual strategy of controlling perception wasn't working. Too many witnesses, too much documentation, too many people who'd started asking questions. This is ridiculous, he said, standing up. If you're going to side with her version of events over mine, then maybe I'm the one who shouldn't be involved in family decisions. The threat hung in the air. The same threat that had worked before. Choose me or face the consequences of my absence. But Dad didn't flinch. Owen, I love you. But love doesn't mean accepting dishonesty. The business succession will be revised to reflect the original plan. If you want to remain involved, you'll work alongside your sister as equal partners. If that's unacceptable to you, we'll find another solution. Another solution? Owen's voice rose. This is my inheritance. You can't just. I can, Dad said firmly. And I am. Because inheritance is earned through contribution, not manipulation. Owen stared at Dad for a long moment. Then he grabbed his jacket and walked out without another word. The room stayed silent after the door slammed. I felt no triumph, just the quiet weight of necessary confrontation. The following weeks were uncomfortable. Owen stopped responding to family messages. His social media went quiet. Several relatives reached out to me privately, some apologizing for not questioning things earlier, others simply expressing support. I didn't gloat. Didn't post about the situation or share my side of the story publicly. When people asked what happened, I kept it simple. We had some misunderstandings about business matters. Dad and I worked through them. Mr. Bernard finalized the revised succession documents. Equal shares, clearly defined roles, built-in accountability measures to prevent future manipulation. Dad signed them in my presence, with Aunt Helena and Uncle Warren as witnesses. "This is what I should have done from the beginning," Dad said. "You did it when it mattered," I replied. About 3 weeks after the confrontation, Owen sent me a text message, "Can we talk?" I agreed to meet him at a neutral coffee shop. We sat across from each other, both cautious. Owen spoke first. I didn't realize how much credit I was taking. I genuinely thought I was contributing equally. I studied his face, trying to determine if he meant it. Decided it didn't matter. His self-awareness wasn't my responsibility. "The pattern existed whether you noticed it or not," I said. "And now it's corrected." We didn't rebuild our relationship immediately. Trust, once damaged this thoroughly, requires time and consistent behavior to repair. But we established professional boundaries for managing the business together. Owen focused on external relationships, marketing, strategic partnerships. I handled operations, finances, internal systems. We communicated through structured meetings and documented decisions. No more private agreements, no more assumed understandings. Slowly, the business found a new rhythm. Owen's strengths in presentation and networking complemented my operational expertise when we worked collaboratively instead of competitively. Within 6 months, revenue increased by 18%. Dad watched our evolving partnership with cautious optimism. "You're better together than I expected," he admitted during one quarterly review. "We're effective because the structure is honest now," I said. "No hidden agendas, no rewritten history. Just clear roles and mutual accountability." What I'd learned through this entire situation was something simple but profound. You can't build anything lasting, not businesses, not families, not relationships, on foundations of convenient lies. Eventually, truth surfaces. The only question is whether you face it proactively or wait for it to collapse everything around you. I'd chosen to face it. And while the confrontation had been difficult, the clarity that followed was worth every uncomfortable moment. A year after the reunion I didn't attend, Dad organized another family gathering. This time, the invitation came from him directly, addressed to each family member individually. No one person controlling the narrative or deciding who belonged. I drove to the same beach town, checked into a small hotel, and arrived at the gathering Saturday afternoon. The atmosphere felt different. Less performative, more genuine. People asked real questions instead of making polished small talk. Owen and I maintained respectful distance but shared civil conversation. We weren't close the way we'd been as children, and maybe we never would be again. But we'd found a working relationship based on honesty rather than illusion. During dinner, Dad stood up to make a toast. "I want to acknowledge something publicly that I should have said a long time ago. This family has been built by people who showed up consistently, worked quietly, and contributed without needing recognition. Your mother was one of those people. And so is Jenny." He raised his glass toward me. "Thank you for your patience, your work, and your honesty, even when honesty was difficult." The family echoed the toast. Aunt Helena caught my eye and smiled. Uncle Warren nodded approvingly. Even Owen raised his glass, expression unreadable but not hostile. I didn't need the public acknowledgement. But it mattered anyway. Driving home Sunday evening, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. Not because everything was perfect or completely resolved, but because the foundation underneath my life was honest now. The business ran smoothly. My contributions were documented and recognized. Family relationships existed in truth rather than comfortable fiction. And most importantly, I'd learned that protecting your dignity sometimes requires confrontation. Not dramatic explosions, but calm, documented truth that refuses to be dismissed. Owen had taught me something valuable, though not what he'd intended. He'd shown me that patience is only a virtue when it's strategic, not when it enables other people's dishonesty. That silence can be powerful, but only when you choose it consciously instead of accepting it by default. I'd spent years being the reliable one, the person who sacrificed without complaint. Now I was still reliable, still present when it mattered. But I'd added something essential to that foundation. Self-respect that refused to be erased, even by someone I loved. The reunion I didn't attend became the turning point that changed everything. Not because I fought or created drama, but because I finally stopped accepting narratives built on lies and started insisting on truth, regardless of how uncomfortable that truth made other people. And that quiet insistence, maintained consistently over time, proved more powerful than any dramatic confrontation could have been. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is simply refuse to disappear.